Okay, so the important part here is that the explicit forecast period, no matter how long it goes on, it's got to be long enough for the company to reach some kind of steady state. And that's why it's important to think about these sort of cyclical companies. The steady state for a cyclical company is sort of the middle of the swing. You want to make sure that you explicitly forecast the entire cycle and then recognize that the cycle is going to continue, but that gives you a good prediction state. The steady state for everyone else is just going to be where we think that either that our predictions are starting to fall apart, which is honestly it's about 15 years for any company. If you're forecasting explicitly longer than that, you're just wasting your time. But for many companies, we're just going to try and say that the steady state occurs at the point where whatever they are engaging in, whatever project or investment has caused them to start this DCF analysis, they finished it. Right? So a lot of times companies start a DCF analysis because they're considering a new investment, maybe they're considering a merger, maybe they're going to introduce a new product line, maybe they're going to engage in a major cost-cutting initiative. Some major project, some investment has caused them to start the DCF analysis. So the steady state is then, at what point do we think the effects of that have completely melded into the firm's financials and steadied out? Alternatively, if we're on the outside and we're thinking about purchasing a stake in the company, or maybe we're another company thinking about acquiring the company that we're studying, again, we're just trying to figure out at which point does everything that's going to change reach some equilibrium, and then our explicit forecast no longer needs to be explicit, and we're assuming the company has a constant growth rate, that they have a constant reinvestment rate, that they have a constant ROIC and RONIC. Remember, there could be a difference between the return on existing invested capital and the return on any new invested capital. And so we're going to distinguish that when we get to the continuing value formula, the key value driver formula. So again, it's going to be different for every firm. Some of this is just, it's a little bit of an art. Again, you sort of get a feel when you're looking at the financials and when you have a good handle on the industry of what the firm behaves, of the industry in which the firm is located and how it behaves. So it's going to be a little bit different, but this is a good rule of thumb. Okay. The second thing we want to talk about is what makes up a good model, and how do we establish a good spreadsheet-based model to do our analysis in. Okay, remember, we're going to be incorporating tons of information into a proper DCF. 10 years of historical information, 15 years of forecasted information, and all of the requisite info that comes along with that. Remember, 10 years of 10Ks could be thousands of pages. And we're going to need to dig our way through all those 10Ks to look through the footnotes that are associated with all the little weird items on the income statement and the balance sheet. Remember when we did the DCF for UPS, we saw all these various footnotes that we were going to have to go investigate further. That's what we're trying to make room for here. It's going to have lots of little notes about things we couldn't dig any further into because we didn't have information. It might have some sort of non-financial information, comments made by the management team, comments made by other analysts about things that are going on and how those guided some of our predictions, some of our assumptions in our inputs. But broadly speaking, what we're trying to do is make as clean and as understandable of an analysis and of a spreadsheet model as we can. And so there are a couple of good rules of thumb to follow to make that happen. First, all of the input that we specifically type in, so that's going to be all the financial data from historical documents and any kind of market data about stock prices, about bond prices, anything that comes from outside sources, we want to try and collect that in, say, the first two tabs. And you'll see this in the homework. I've got the homework between 4 and 5 separated into 6 tabs. Do each unique thing that in the DCF process in a separate tab. And not only that, it's often really helpful to note the stuff that the input that you input. So the numbers, the historical numbers that you input, the market data in different colors. So put the historical information in yellow color, make the cells yellow, put the market data in using like a green or a blue color. That way everything is, and you can have a key up top, that way everything is sort of denoted and it's easy to follow. Okay, everything that's got a yellow cell, this is stuff that we've input, so there could be errors there. Everything that's left in white has been determined within the model, within the spreadsheet, and it's been calculated based on the inputs that we have. Right? Other than that, everything should be linked and everything should be Excel coded, meaning don't code any of your calculations or don't calculate any of your calculations outside of Excel using a calculator on a piece of paper, say, and then just type in the number. That's what we mean by hard coding. You guys have seen this in the homework. I'm trying to force you never to do this, because the goal of a good DCF model is that every year you could go in and you could replace 1 year's of forecast with 1 year of a new year of historical data. Right? So say we're doing a model starting in 2020. I would have 10 years of historical data from 2010 to 2019, and then I would have forecasts from 2020 onward. Right? My goal would be to have a spreadsheet built so well that at the end of 2020, so next January in 2021, I can input 2020's data now as historical, and I can push my forecast out to another year in the future, so 2036 or whatever that would be, 15 years from now. And my model will automatically update everything without me doing a single other thing. In other words, the forecasts are built so that they're tied to cells from the inputs. All of the calculations for NOPLAT and free cash flow are tied to the reorganized financial statements that we have, and the model calculates enterprise value directly. We may have to make a few changes if the firm has made any major differences or made any major changes in their financials. Maybe they've gotten some major changes in the way they report operating assets, or maybe they've got some new non-operating assets, or they've entered into some kind of sale-leaseback agreement that's changed the balance sheet somewhat. But barring any of that, we would like this to be as automated a process as we can, because this is a huge process. It's going to take months to really get a good one, right? There's just no way around it. And as an analyst, or as a consultant, or as someone working in the firm, an analyst in the firm, you're going to have to do one of these every year, more or less. And so you want the updating process to not take you months. You want the updating process to take you a couple weeks or a couple days, depending on how much has changed. Okay, and build a well-built model, a well-built spreadsheet model here is the best one, is the best way to make sure that happens. Okay, so here in this slide we've got the tabs of a well-built model and how they should flow into each other, and these are the tabs. So we start with our raw historical data. This is where we collate all of the data from the company's financials. This can be kind of a messy file. We're going to put in all kinds of footnotes here, all kinds of tables. We're going to plug in every bit of data that we can. In the next step, I like to have a step here, integrated financials. I like to take all that raw data and then remake a balance sheet and income statement, raw balance sheet and income statement that is bigger than what's the consolidated income statement and balance sheet. In other words, take some of the stuff out of the footnotes, put it into the financial statements themselves, and build out a bigger, more general set of financial statements. Then we do our historical analysis. We're trying to analyze the firm. We're thinking about what's driving their growth, what's driving their returns, how the firm is going to change based on whatever it is whatever the impetus is for us doing this kind of analysis. And then we're building our forecast ratios based on that. So I'm saying, okay, the firm is planning on releasing a new product line. Here's the historical information for the firm and its various product lines. We think that this new product line is going to generate a third more revenue based on forecasts for market forecasts for demand for this product. So we're going to change some of the ratios, the forecast ratios for the firm to reflect that. And here's how we've forecasted out the next 15 years of the firm based on this new product line. Then we're going to have a tab where we collect a bunch of market data. This is how we are, and we'll cover this in a couple chapters, but this is how we start to analyze the cost of capital for the firm, which is WACC, weighted average cost of capital. So we're pulling in stock prices so that we can calculate betas and cost of equity. We're pulling down debt information, debt prices and bond prices, so that we can calculate the cost of debt. We're looking at any other sources of financing so that we can calculate the costs of those sources of financing, and then we're estimating the WACC using all that data. Then finally, we're getting into the meat of the analysis. All those four steps, this was historical data. We weren't doing anything but collating that and making it readable. Then we reorganize the financial statements so that we can calculate NOPLAT and invested capital. We do that on the historical data, and then we do it on our forecasted data. That way we can look at the trends in NOPLAT invested capital and make sure that they make sense based from our forecast. Then we're doing return on invested capital and free cash flow. So we're calculating NOPLAT, invested capital. We're using those to calculate free cash flow. And particularly we care about, obviously, free cash flow on the forecasted data because that's how we value the company. And then the last step, we calculate our enterprise discounted cash flow. We look at the non-operating assets. We look at try and determine equity price, all based on these forecasts that we made.